Over the past month or so, the topic that we've kind of begun to really delve into has been about our emotions, whether it's through VBS, whether it has been through previous weeks before that, when we were looking and diving into the teaching by Dr. Paula Price. We've really been focusing on and really drilling on our emotions and seeing the moments where our emotions have led us, and also talking about emotional dishonesty, different moments in which our emotions may have led the way when it wasn't supposed to, and really taking our time to really delve into that and break it down. Now, I don't know about anyone else, but for me, during this past month or so, in this topic, it really has drummed up some things in my past that I haven't thought about. I don't know if anyone else has gone through this experience, but it's cool in retrospect, but it can be very painful in real time, where God is kind of peeling back a layer. All of us, and I'm looking who's online and who's here in person, we've all heard the analogy that Apostle's given, mainly about deliverance, but really how God works that it's like an onion, that he goes layer by layer. And so when he's peeled a layer back and you worked in one layer, you kind of forget sometimes what it feels like when he peels the next layer off, and it gets really close, it gets closer to the core. And so for me, the way that's kind of been feeling has been, he's going back in my life. So there's things, within my marriage that we've talked about went there. Then he goes back to college. Then he's kind of gone back to high school. Right now, the moment that I'm in personally is God went back into my elementary years and about emotions and things of that nature. And so going through this for me has really allowed for God to peel back another layer. And there's some things in that layer that I forgot about or I did not connect to where I'm at right now. And some of it as a source, good, positive, also not so positive. And it really gave me a moment to really kind of analyze, what do I do with that information now? And so I say all that to say for tonight, if you saw band or kind of seeing where we're going, tonight is going to really be about a discussion. Hopefully this is the most I'm talking at one good time, because we want to have a dialogue using some questions to not just recap and talk about the emotional dishonesty teaching by Dr. Paula Price, tying in lessons from Vacation Bible School last week from the adult class, but also looking back as things to share how we can apply the teaching that we received. Because it's one thing to get this knowledge and have this information, but we really have to turn it over into application and to be able to see the fruit of it, to allow for it to manifest, whether it's big or small. The act of applying it and manifesting it is very key. And what's in the interest for some of these things we might have already applied and manifested, we can speak to it. And others, we may still be waiting to manifest or turn it over. And so where you're at on whatever the information is or point, it's okay. The biggest thing is making sure that you're progressing forward and always being prepared to turn over into application so it can be present in this world, in this time. So like I said, tonight is really going to be using some questions to begin to just have some dialogue and some conversation. Now, Pastor Vince, I know that you are at work, so you won't be able to verbally talk. But if you have a time and we at work, if you throw things in the chat, I got your back, I'll read it and we'll go from there. So no worries. But you just being here, Pastor Vince, is a wonderful thing. And so glad to see you here as well. All right. So y'all ready to get started?
Yes.
Yes. Thumbs up. Let me know what's going on. See, this is like kind of getting me back in the realm of like that response part and all that. So y'all help me out get my teaching skills back up, even though today is the last day of summer school for me. Still getting those repetitions back up of, wait time and all of that. It's like riding a bike, but you got to get back on that bike, right? Good shot. So, and so I'm going to apologize in advance. I don't have the questions. Put like a PowerPoint to be able to kind of share the questions. So I won't post all the questions all at once. I'll try to chop it up to manageable pieces, but I am looking And I do want to hear your voices. I do want to hear your thoughts, thinking through and what have you. And so I'm going to go ahead and start. And one of the quotes that came out of, or that began the teaching that Dr. Paula Price delivered, or that we watched about soul success, was the statement of, your talents can take you where your soul can't keep you. Your talents can take you where your souls can't keep you. And so, talking about how we have these talents, we have these items that move us forward in the way as well. They're there, but our soul, we want to go places where our soul is able to keep us and sustain us. And so, with that being said, one of the situations we think about is when we have difficult people or competitors or rivals, and they want to take us out. They want to eliminate us from the process. They want to eliminate us from the prospect. When that happens, what will our soul do? How will our soul respond or behave? So will we retreat? When we have that opposition, if you will, do we kind of shrill? Does our soul go into a turtle mode? Or do we blow up like a flame and start burning everything down? Everything goes down to the ground. How does our soul respond when that happens? What do we do? So I pose that question to everyone. When you have difficult people or competitors or rivals that ain't trying to cooperate, they're trying to take your spot, they're trying to challenge you, they're trying to do whatever that placement is for you, how does your soul respond to that? How does it react? What is that initial jerk reaction that occurs?
The only thing I can think of is it wasn't so much being tested, but I can remember, well, sort of. I can remember a time in my life where I was looking for another job. I was looking to change my career. Someone had gotten a hold of my resume and they'd contacted me, and a friend of mine had just moved back here from Texas and she was sitting at my house. The job that they wanted to offer me would have been perfect for me. And because of my talents, they wanted me. But herein lies the problem. Because of my convictions, I couldn't take this job. The job was at Planned Parenthood. And because of what Planned Parenthood stands for in some aspects, my soul wouldn't allow for me to be there. I could not have been comfortable. All money is not good money. I couldn't have been there and been able to do what it is that God called me to do. Now, yes, I could have walked in the doors and I could have helped people, but at the same time, I had to still service those that were choosing to have an abortion at that point in time. So at that time, I had to check my own emotions. Did I want to trust in my abilities to be able to help take care of my family, or did I trust God fully? That was a hard decision. The horrible thing was my friend that was there, she was desperate for a job. She ended up getting the job. She did really well there. She didn't survive there. However, we both were supposed to have the same convictions because we were serving the same God. She made a different choice than I did, and I had to not get in my emotions and convict her for her decision because she wasn't where I was in God. So that's the only thing that comes to mind for me.
So, first of all, thank you for sharing that, Ms. Velda. So when you, when you heard about your friend who took the position, what was the emotion that you felt? It sounds like you said, your position when you were going for it and looking at it because of where it was at.
Well, I was there when she took the position. So the ironic thing was they were calling for me to take the job and they were going to offer it to me right on the spot. And I told them, I really just can't take it. I didn't go into detail as to why I couldn't take it. And I was like, but my friend's in the background and she's doing all these motions like, let me talk to him, let me talk to him. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to let you talk to him. I assumed she would come up with the same thing that I did because we're supposed to be serving the same God. But her conviction wasn't my conviction. And I had to stay out of my emotions and not attack her because her level of conviction wasn't where mine was at. So that was a challenge for me because I'm like, okay, you just got back here. You're trying to get on your feet. This probably isn't the way that you want to do it. But again, her conviction isn't my conviction. So I had to check my emotions and kind of do what Dr. Price said. You can't go to somebody and be like, you know, you ain't supposed to be doing this. I had to say, okay, this is where she stands right now. She doesn't have the same level of faith that I have, and that's okay. She doesn't have to. Years later, I mean, she lasted there for quite a while, but it still wasn't as prosperous for her as she had anticipated that it would be. But I knew that had I have taken it at that time, I would have destroyed a lot of what God had for me.
Got it. Anyone else? Now rephrase the question. When difficult people, competitors, or rivals want to eliminate you from the process, eliminate you from the prospects, when that happens, what will your soul do? Would it harden? Would it retreat like a turtle? Would it put everything ablaze? What does it do? What does your soul do?
Okay, since nobody else is talking, I'll just talk again. It depends on where I'm at, actually, as to what my soul's going to do. I think if you catch me in a season where I might have had a busy week and I didn't take the time out to pray the way that I was supposed to, I might be sharper in my natural than I am my spiritual. And depending on where you catch me, I might get you told. So I'd be acting out of my emotions. I'm just going to be real about it. But if you caught me at a time where I've had time to spend with God and I'm listening to him nudging me on my shoulder saying, Val, shut up, then I might shut up, but not necessarily. It just really depends on where I'm at.
No, and I think, and like you're mentioning, like you're talking through, part of it may be situational, environmentally, where you're at and all of that, and those are definitely portions to definitely be aware of. For me, I'm going to be a flamethrower. When I'm challenged, my initial reaction is to retreat, to avoid conflict. Now, I am better at acknowledging that and working through it as the kids would say, sometimes I just have to choose violence when it occurs. But other times, my go-to setting, if you will, is to take a step back. In moments I've said, let them be great, and let God be God. But there's moments where, but for me, it's recognizing that sometimes being non-confrontational is more of it can be a surrendering moment when God's like, no, I need you to stand up at this time. And so knowing that about me, that's like a default setting, I really have to be very conscious of it and really fight against it at times. Now, there are times which God is like, this is not your battle. Like, there are literally times where there's conflict there and it's like, nah, this ain't your battle. I got it. There's more to the story. But there's other times where I have to stand in that position. But, I would be totally lying to you if I said I got it right 100%. That ain't the case. If I get it 75%, I am happy right now because that is growth. But
See, I'm not a retreater. That's what the issue. So we need to balance each other here because I'm not a retreater. If I retreat, you probably should run.
Well, and here's the thing: when it's retreat, here's the thing, and this is why I mentioned it's retreat. Part of it is me being smart as a kid, if I'm just gonna be honest. Because it's like, I'm gonna let you fall on your face because you ain't want to listen to what I'm saying the first time. So it's really me retreating, being a smart aleck a part of the time, but most of the time it's like it's like, okay, so one of the things is the question. So it's like, why does my soul automatically go into retreat? It's because then I think about the moments that I was inadequate when I spoke. I was inadequate when I responded, or I got flustered and I talked so quickly that no one could understand what I'm saying. And so it goes back to that. Then it's like, well, why is that the case? Because then I feel like I'm embarrassed. And so it's like a defense mechanism for me. And so if there's like difficult people, competitors, rivals, like I said, my setting is, I'm gonna back off because I ain't about this tension. But you'll notice I'm getting better at, let me engage in the fight a little bit more, because what you're saying, it's not right, or the way you present it is not working. And but it's recognizing that that's like the default setting for me. And even when I don't get my way. Now in public, I'm a little better at this of keeping my poker face, but I have a wife who sees a lot more than what a lot of people see. And she will see that if I'm not getting my way or something's up, I go into this whole cave mode, if you will, where I don't really communicate well. I've gotten better and have some strategies to get out of it. But once again, what is that initial reaction that my soul's going to do? It's going to try to support itself by trying to find that way of make myself right, even though I may be the one that's wrong. And so that's where my emotions leading me. And as you mentioned, Velda, is that I have to fight through that to get to God and be like, okay, God, what is it? And really wrangle in. And as First Peter mentioned, really gird up the loins of my emotions. Because there are moments where I'm like, I want to go off. I want to snap. I want to say these words that I should not be saying, because it will make me feel so much better and get this off of me, because it can be over with. But it's trying to find a way to do it in which it's the way it should be done. Even though my flesh and my emotions, and like, just say it, I can't, that's not always the case. And especially when I'm agitated. I have to be really mindful of that for me. And so if I blow up, know that like I've been sitting on this for a very long time. It ain't just coming to nowhere. But I know that's for me, and that's where my initial part kind of jump up to. Katrina, can you think of any moments in which, when you have that's the difficult people, competitors, what have you, that you kind of see that this is what my default action is?
Well, for me, initially, I would like, I don't need help, thanks, ma'am. Initially, I would like to, in my insides, I'm blowing up, because I used to, before I came to this place that I'm at right now, I would just say it and we'll just go, whatever happens, happens. However, God is doing something different with me. And it really, it's a battle. And like, I'm having this inside battle, this internal battle, because people will say something to me and I'm like, I'm going to help them help themselves right now. And God's like, no, you're not. I'm going to help them, but I just need you to be quiet, or I need you to take a deep breath and think about it before you actually open your mouth. And I'm not gonna lie, that's different for me. So sometimes I just kind of stare at people, but it's really because I'm literally going through this whole thing, like working this out in my brain, me and God, before I open my mouth. It's not always easy, because then sometimes I feel kind of weak. Like, I feel really weak right now that I didn't say A, B, C, and D, or,
Katrina, did we lose Katrina?
I think so. I can't hear her any longer.
I can't either. Katrina, if you can hear us, your audio just went out. In the middle of you talking. Okay, you just went on mute. Okay. Okay, so Katrina, we kind of get together. Okay, now you're switching over. I see you.
okay, I'm not sure what's going on with that. It just kept saying unstable. So I don't know what you guys heard and what you didn't hear, but like I said, I guess I'll just go back and just real quick. Inside, normally, if somebody comes to me with some stuff, my initial reaction is to blow up. And I used to, I would say whenever, however, didn't care what you felt like afterwards, as long as I proved that I was right and you were wrong, you know, and stuff like that. But God has kind of put me in a different place where I'm not able to do that. He's actually making me shut my mouth and be quiet, you know, listen to what the person's saying. You know, I'm like, but God, I want to let them know that they're wrong. I'm 100% right. He's not allowing me to move like that any longer. So it is a battle. It's not easy. And there's some days like I literally could just cry, like scream, throw a tantrum, roll on the floor, because I'm like, why did I have to be quiet when I could have literally just shut them down where they were standing? So I don't know if this is some type of new soul cleansing, some type of, you know, he's reprogramming me, because where I am going to have to move differently. I can't just blow up, cuss you out, put you in your place, and then I can't do that. So yeah, it's something different that I'm walking in right now, and it is very uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the big things that comes like with this teaching and kind of this reality that we're noticing, and you know, that reconciliation that's happening is that we're finding out the way how to contend with the discomfort. And as we kind of, you know, those that have shared already, you know, we kind of hinted at like different strategies that we kind of use to get past that first kind of line of defense and being aware. One of the things that's awesome is that we can be aware of what those, I won't say triggers, but like what's our first inclination. And it's like when we recognize what that is, then we're able then to address it. But definitely also recognizing that we don't want to pacify it. We want to do, like you said, Katrina, is really allow God to be able to reprogram us, because we're going to continue to run into those uncomfortable moments, events, what have you. And, you know, if we believe in what Matthew, you know, when it says in Matthew about, you know, being followers of Jesus Christ, we're going to be persecuted pretty much the whole time. And we have this understanding that this walk with God and this being, you know, the being children of God, that it comes with, you know, an uncomfortable life. We know we're going to continue to run into these moments where we're going to be tested, whether by God or by the world or by the enemy or what have you, and that our soul is constantly being pretty much checked and, you know, definitely being monitored. And so I want to kind of think about it, throw out there, really want to see some real life application and see what people have done is, how do we get beyond the elementary responses to pressure? Because really when we're talking about, when we have the, you know, the example we have set up, we're really talking about that pressure that we are feeling, that press that we may feel when we get in those encounters. And so how do we get beyond kind of those initial response? Like, how do we get there? How did you get there? If you recognize, you go back and you see you have those elementary responses, but you've grown from it, what was that process that you had to go through with God so that you don't just have those rudimentary responses, you actually have developed responses to the pressure that doesn't force you to act out of emotion, but to act out of the person you are through God.
Okay, here I come again.
Go ahead.
So for me, with my adult children, this has really changed for me. It used to be that if something happened to my children and they came to me and they were upset, they were crying, they were full of emotions, it would automatically trigger me to run into an emotion. But at this point in time in my life, God has caused me to sit back and just watch and pray. I have even gotten to a space with them where if they come and they tell me something, I don't automatically react the way that I used to. I'm just like, okay, that's what you went through. This is a decision you made. Okay. And it's taking them aback. So that change has come about where God is showing me through them how to handle life differently than I did the first 50 years. So this next set of 50 years will be different for me And he's teaching me to, like Katrina said, that battle was going on internally. Some of the stuff I'm like, what in the world have you got yourself into? Are you crazy? I'm thinking in my mind, but I can't. I have to do what OC said and have that poker face. And I can't react the way that I used to. And I think that it's now putting my soul at ease, because if you did something to my children previously, somebody was going to have to get hurt. But I'm not in that space any longer. So the change is coming about. It was a slow process, but God has been slowly but surely working through me to bring forth that change.
And so, um, and so with that, I think something to highlight in there that I guess that I'm picking up is that it was a slow, maybe another word to go with is intentional process with it. Especially with it starting with you, Ms. Bell, and then like obviously applying it with your adult children and really standing on it. It wasn't just kind of a one-time thing. It's something you had to, I'm assuming, you definitely correct me if I'm wrong, something you had to do consistently so that they can get used to the new normal or get used
Yep,
to it.
because they would often say, "Are you okay? How come you haven't said anything? How come you haven't done anything?" Or they'd start off their sentence with, "Mom, don't go off, but da 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 happened." And I'd be like, "Okay." And then they'd look puzzled, like, "Okay, the fireworks aren't coming, guns aren't toting, what's going on?" So it was something different for them as well as for me. And it's becoming a new norm for them, but initially it was a big change and they weren't sure how to respond to it.
So let me ask this question. So did you find that did you find as you had the different conversations with the adult children that I won't call it an attack, that the encounters had like different flavors and you recognize you had to be stable, if that makes any sense?
In some instances, yes, I would say that would be true. I think that also it was also God allowing them not to pull on my coattail, but on his. I think I was that safe haven, although they were adults. When they would run into adult things, they weren't exactly sure how to handle it. So they'd run to me first and I'd take care of it. But God is teaching them to have a dependence on him and not me any longer. So it's also developing their relationship with him.
And did you find that those approaches carrying over to your workplace? Because I know in the past you shared multiple stories, giving testimony of, some of the young people there kind of gravitating to you to not have like not to serve like in a motherly role, but to be kind of like that support. Did you kind of see similar strategies applying there as well?
Not really, because I've been home for so long and we don't have a lot of interactions any longer. So, I mean, that has changed, but it has not changed the young people that are around me in my life. They still will reach out. Some of my kids' friends that I haven't seen for a long time, they'll run into me and they'll be like, "I just need to talk to you. Your talks help me," or something of that nature. So they'll reach out to me on Facebook Messenger or things like that. So that hasn't changed. And I think it was always a different dynamic with them than it was with my children directly. But what I'm finding with the younger people now is they will appreciate the fact that I have a no judgment zone for them, and they feel more comfortable now, even in their adult life, telling me things they have no business telling me. But I mean, I think just having that no judgment zone for them makes them comfortable, and that opens up a lot of doors to ministry.
So have you found yourself So have you found it, even when they're sharing that, and as we said, we talk about having the poker face, that even with the approach that you do still feel at times the fire coming up of like, okay, you're touching one of these kiddos, I'm about to.
Oh, absolutely. I've had a couple of young ladies where men have put hands on them, and the old me wants to rise and be like, oh, where you at? Let's go. But I can't do that. So I just have to counsel them through it and explain to them what their worth is, and they're worth more than that. So yeah, I still can't show the emotion that I want to. And for me, I think the challenge is if I don't say it out of my mouth, you see it on my face. And I'm still trying to learn through God's grace how to be delivered from my facial expressions. But
Amen.
so that, Katrina, holler for the people in the back.
That was an amen for myself as well, Mrs. Belda, not just you.
Honey,
Yeah,
I'm telling you.
Hilda.
Oh my goodness. I really try. I really try not to show, but years of doing it, it took a while to get there, and sometimes it may take a while to get away from it. But I believe that through God's grace, I am doing better than I used to. And then if it shows on my face, I know I probably got about 10.7 seconds to get out of there before it comes out my mouth sometimes. So yeah.
Ms. Kim, were you gonna say something? I saw you were unmuted.
No, I was just agreeing with Miss Velda that, Apostle always says, you got to watch your facial expressions because it tells the whole story of what you're thinking. And so, I don't know. Your guys' conversations making me think about what happened the other day in my apartment complex. There's these little kids, and you don't really see them too often, but I have a big green space between my building and another building, and the kids were playing, and the older boy, who couldn't have been more than 8 years old, was picking up rocks out of the rock beds that are on each side of every building, and he was throwing them at the other kids, and of course they were too far away, thankfully. But the next time he picked up a rock, I opened my door and I stormed outside and I yelled at him, put that rock down. You're going to hurt somebody if you throw it. And he just dropped it, and he looked at me and terrified, I'm sure. So I'm trying to think of what my facial expression was when I looked at him. And I don't know anything about these kids. I just know that that's the first time I've ever seen anybody pick up rocks. And it horrified me personally to see him throwing rocks. And I'm sure it horrified him as well when I yelled at him, but I didn't want anybody to get hurt. And I think about times where I've lashed out at people exactly like that, but for different reasons. And then and that's kind of a reaction that I would have, if somebody's hurting somebody else, that's not the kind of reaction I try to have anymore. For like, I used to be a door slammer, and retreat like you, Pastor Osi. I used to retreat. But I also stand up for people when it's hard for me to explain, because I didn't grow up with brothers and sisters like most of you guys did. So, if I had a friend and she was, about ready to get punched by somebody, I'm going to step in there and do the first punch, and that's how I used to be. But I will still stand up for people's rights if somebody's doing them wrong. But as far as like in my office, for instance, I can't get mad at people in my office. I can tell them that I'm busy if they call back, if I don't want to deal with them again. but I'm probably not going to because they need my help or they wouldn't be calling. So it just depends on the circumstances, I think, in my case, because I don't have anybody around. I live alone. You know, the only time I see people is when I go to work or the grocery store, out to eat, maybe the post office, those type of places. So there's times where I feel like I want to say something, but I hold back because it's not my place to say something. Like a little child in the grocery store might be grabbing stuff off the shelf and squishing it and smashing it all up, you know, like a bag of potato chips or something. But it's not my place to say that anything to them. But there's been
Just give them
times
the
where,
eye.
there's been times where I've talked to the parents, you know, about something that the child did that was wrong. So I don't know if this is fitting in with what you're talking about, but you know, my emotions flip in different circumstances. I respond differently. And I really try to, sometimes I just have to say, God, why did I say that to that person? And sometimes I say, God, why didn't I say that to that person? You know, so I
No.
have all kinds of,
No, go ahead, Ms. Campbell. Go ahead and finish what you're gonna say.
no, I just was gonna say that I have all kinds of ways that I handle things, and sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong. And when it's wrong, you know, I try to apologize to people. And if I'm right, you know, maybe they'll apologize to me, but sometimes they don't because they don't have the, what do I want to say? Maybe the wisdom from learning over the past 10 years with New Beginnings. I have learned so much, you know, that I've learned how to respond differently to different things.
One, I think, well, okay, so when it, okay, let's kind of see. First of all, what you're saying does fit what we're talking about, because when we're talking about the emotions, whether from Dr. Paul Price or even from BBS, it's recognizing that we're not asking for our emotions to be eliminated. We're asking and trying to find ways to allow for them to be submitted under God's direction. I think that's kind of a big point to highlight, that we're not saying eliminate our emotions, or our emotions cannot. We're trying to find ways for our emotions to work for for God, you know, and align those things there. And so what it comes down to is recognizing, understanding, and finding those moments where, you know, if this were to occur, if this situation happens, or this type of pressure arises, recognizing when our emotions kick in instead of God kicking in and using the proper emotion to fulfill God's will. And so in the midst of this conversation and dialogue, is really looking at what is that, you know, either the initial retreat or fire, and especially looking for those moments where the emotion flies out without us even thinking about it. And it paralyzes our spirit man from even operating. Because, you know, continue to keep in the forefront that our soul is made up of our mind, our will, and our emotion. And so what you're kind of leaning toward in this camp is recognizing those moments when the soul either is trying to take over or is about or has taken over. And maybe not so much right now, but there's times in which something will occur and we have a flashback to where that happened in some other arena, and boom, it takes us back to that moment and we react the same way. And you know, that's the portion that's looking at. And if that happens, the result becomes a sabotaging soul. You know, one that can be curt, dismissive, cut people off. No one can tell them anything. And it's one in which the soul at that point is starting to really kind of sink the person. And notice that with soul being made up of mind, will, and emotion, you don't hear Holy Spirit, you don't hear God in that voice is being minimized. And so for what you're sharing, Ms. Kim, even for you, Ms. Velda, what you shared already, Katrina, it's really talking about being on that road and acknowledging the emotion hitting, not allowing it to come out the way it did before, because the old thing has passed away, but truly learning how to operate in this new thing. I think about Saul who turned to Paul in the New Testament, and I always go back and I always find amazement in when he was converted, he didn't lose all the history that he learned. What happened is that all the knowledge that he had, because he was a boss, he was a beast, he was, the top, he was the top of everything when it comes down to the history and how everything operates, is that God was able to use that, sprinkle himself, the Spirit on top of it, and to still be able for that to be used for the building of the kingdom of God. And so with our emotions, always keeping in mind that, these emotions we can have and utilize, but what's the purpose of it? Is the purpose of the emotion just to feed the flesh? Have a temporary satisfaction moment, but then we feel regret and all these other things afterwards? Or is it to edify the kingdom of God? Is it to show godly love? Is it to show godly anger? Is it to show, the different, like what is the purpose of these emotions? And so going through, so when it comes down to the teaching and the breaking down, is seeing how do we utilize what we have and allow for God to use it. And as you mentioned, Ms. Kim, then displaying it, manifesting it to others. Not always coming down with the, King James version of it, and all of that. But if we live it out, it begins to be that living epistle that is talked about, that people are able to read and to show. Yes, our character will be illuminated and talked about of, like you said, Ms. Velda, people see like you're calm or you changed or you're a common figure or you're able to, I don't use the word center because that's not what I'm trying to say, but you're very even keeled. You're able to approach it and hear all the words. But like we talked about, people don't know if you came from a point, and this is not just you as well, it's all of us, where either we retreated, we fight or flight. We hear one, we don't gotta hear the whole detail. I have aunts where, so I'll give you an example. I can share this example, I'm not gonna get in trouble. So I was in Georgia, Savannah, Georgia. And on this particular day, I was scheduled to fly back home to Houston. And been my family, I'm very close to that side of family. So a call came in to my grandmother's house, which was like Grand Central Station. And the call hit that one of my cousins was about to get jumped by another family. When I tell you, all of us came together like SWAT on this location, like we got there before the police got there. And I don't mean just like me and my aunt. I'm talking me, my aunt, my other aunt who had the bail money. We're talking my cousins who was down for whatever. That I got records and I will go back for this. Like it was like we were 15 deep in this situation that occurred. And we're going there, my grandmother's on the phone calling us, want to make sure she's up to date. Even my that grandmother be in the chair, you don't really think she understands. She's a ride or die. I'm just gonna be real with you. She can back signal all of us. Anyway, so it happened. And in the story, by the way, nothing happened, no hands were thrown, no one went to jail, what I know. Made my flight and all this stuff. Here's the point I make with that story. The first reaction was to roll out. The first emotion was to be ready to put hands on whoever was there. The first reaction wasn't to pray. The first reaction wasn't to call the cops. The first reaction wasn't about the person's safety. We heard the call, we rolled out. So how many times in our life have we done that before, even as we walk with God? Because that was an immediate reaction that was totally emotional. And the reaction ended up triggering the entire family to ascend upon this person. Now, our family ain't no punk, but was that the right reaction? Because now once we leave, this person got to deal with the reaction of, your family crazy. They live this, that. and that becomes a moment of the soul was leading, the emotion took the lead. Granted, it could have, if it was safety, why didn't we call the cops? You know what I'm saying? If it was safe, like there was other options we could have done, but emotion took over, overrid what would be a normal reaction for any other person. And we was like, nope, we're gonna handle this. And this is with family members that weren't even talking to each other. As soon as they heard something's going down, we didn't have beef, but you about to put your hands on no one else. And rolled out. When I say rolled out, I was so proud of my family in that moment. But now I look back at it and I'm like, we all could have got arrested for trespassing. And this is in broad, this is 2 o'clock in the afternoon. This is not 9 o'clock at night. This is not 7:30 in the morning. This is after lunch traffic. And a trip that should have took us 7 minutes took us 3. Like, this is how it was. But I share that story to be, that was the emotional reaction that afterwards, everyone, catch this, came back to themselves. And was like, why did we do that? Why did we respond that way? This person don't even fight. Like, why did we all of a sudden jump into this mode? Why was that our reaction when we still could have been all about our family business, but not put all of ourselves in danger to get arrested? Yes, I have an aunt that from the military, and she was already gonna sign up and be like, I got PTSD. She already was like, that's what I'm saying. I'm about the rest of y'all, I'm gonna use that. But it's those incidents that the teaching in the past month have been about are really like, why is that trigger or that pressure the thing that caused us to override everything and be like, throw it in the wind? Boom. Like that's the type of situation, because that was when the sabotage of the spirit came up and soul came up. To be like,
but I think that for a lot of us in our communities, that's what we were taught. We were taught to band together. And the other thing is, we were taught that Jesus goes on either short-term disability or leave of absence when you bother one of mine. And then after we get done taking you to the healing land, then we'll come back and we'll go back to work. That's how we were taught. But now we're learning something different. And I can understand completely what Trina is saying. It is a difficult, a very uncomfortable situation, especially when you're a vocal person and you're used to getting your point across. And like I said, if I don't listen to that tap on the shoulder, Val, shut your mouth, then Val opens her mouth and gets in trouble. And then we got to go back and have this long drawn out conversation about how I overrode the Holy Spirit and didn't listen to his voice. And we have to go on from there. But I think that certain situations, like you say, trigger those reactions that we were taught as children. And especially if you grew up in a village, this is the way we do it. Like when I was growing up, there were, this side is against this side. So east side don't ride over to the west side and west side don't ride to the east side, or everybody's going to be fighting on a side. That's just the way that it was. But now we have to be the ride or dies for Jesus. And when you have something that's been embedded in you for 50 years, and you coming into year 51 and you're like, okay, God, this been here for a long time. I need you to take it out. We don't think about that taking out process. A lot of times we say these words, but getting those emotions under control is not an easy task always. And it depends on the situation, I believe, but it is possible to do. But again, when it's been embedded in you for so long, you have to consciously make a decision not to do it, because the first response is going to be that knee-jerk one that has always been there.
Katrina, were you going to say something, or you just agree with this?
I was just agreeing. And I'm like, that's exactly, it's like your flesh, that's what it is. Your flesh will be like, let's do it. This is how we always done it. Let's go. And then you get that voice that's like, let's not, and just even hearing, listening to you talk about what you were just talking about, the family and stuff, like I'm that friend, I was that friend who they would call and they would tell me what's going on. I'm getting worked up. Let's go. Let's ride. We getting in. We're gonna go handle this, and then whatever happens, happens. However, I am the friend now. And they kind of look at me like, oh, okay, because I'm like, well, let's take a break. Let's think through this, and they're like, let's think through it. Let's go. But now I get the calls like, hey, can you pray for me? Can we pray together? Or and I'm like, right now, so I'm like, just understanding that had I continued down that path, a lot of them might just still be out here, and probably have some, I don't have a record, praise God, however, that could, it could be on the other side of it, but just understanding that he's using me differently, but I'm still going to continue to say that it is uncomfortable because I guess, like I said, my flesh has been trained to do certain things for so long. And now that he's bringing me out of that, I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever been around people and you're walking this walk with God and they know you're walking it, and then you spaz out and say something crazy and they hit you with the okay woman of God. And it's like that gut punch, like, dang, however, so I really am like, try to be real sensitive to that because I'm like, mostly everybody that I deal with, the ones who are in my inner circle anyway, they know, and the ones who aren't should be able to see it. But anyway, they know where I'm at right now in my life, and I don't want to kill my witnesses. So I really, really, really try to be sensitive to what comes out of my mouth. I'm not always successful, but I'm actually trying to, like I said, the flesh, that flesh will revert back quick. I can hear a song and it wants to go, but I'm like, can you not? So just really working on, getting that flesh under control. So yeah, that's all.
So Patricia, kind of ask a follow-up question because you talk about how you were the friend that was all I need is 3 words of he did or they did, and it's like, all right, well, you like regulators mount up, and now you're at the point where you pray what have you. Can you talk about what were kind of actual steps that you had to take to get to where you're at now, even though you're maybe not where you want to be with it? What were things that you had to do consciously, and maybe things you still do now consciously, to ensure that you take the proper step to not kill your witnesses to the best of your ability? Can you talk about that for me, please?
Yeah, I don't recall all the steps, but I know just getting closer to God, through prayer. And really, I want to say when I first came to NBDM, I still was that friend. But as I was, more prayer time and Bible study, and really just letting the word actually penetrate through all those rough areas. And I literally was like, okay, God, I had to make a choice. Am I going to continue to straddle the fence, or am I really going to be all in? You can continue to say I'm all in, but your walk looks different. So I decided I was going to be all in. And again, it was not an easy, and still not an easy thing to do, but I decided to surrender. And I fell a few thousand times. I'm not even going to say a couple of times, but I continued to press into that. And like I said, for me, one of the biggest turning points for me was when I was letting somebody have it after I had done all these steps, and they hit me with the okay woman of God. And I was like, oh my gosh. Like, I don't know, it felt like somebody just took the air out of me. So I literally, God, he wouldn't let me, condemn myself, but I was convicted. And I, again, spent more time in prayer and just soaking and just taking in his word, like, okay, what can I do? And even doing like, those word studies, looking up those things that maybe whatever my flesh is going through, like that anger side of it. Okay, well, what does the word say about it? I mean, it takes work. It doesn't happen overnight. And like I said, it's a constant thing that you have to continue to work on, but you have to be willing. And again, you're going to have to surrender. If you're not willing to do those things, there's not really going to be a change that's going to take place, because you might say you want to, but if you're not willing to put your hands to it, it's not going to work. So just really pushing and being consistent. I would say that, being consistent.
And I think what you're kind of leading into, Katrina, is when we start to talk about the definition of like emotional dishonesty. The definition, and this is from the Dr. Paula Price teaching, the definition is being dishonest about how we are feeling or using our emotional state to get attention while denying we are experiencing something. And so, from what you shared, I really kind of picked up that part of we have to be truthful about how we are. I think one of the things that we've talked about over the years is taking off that mask, and being comfortable with being uncomfortable of realizing who is our authentic self. And it's one thing to kind of take off the mask and you destroy it, but it's another thing to realize that it's not we're taking off a mask, we have to take off the masks, plural. And so part of it is then we reveal the true essence of who we are and also who God wants us to be. And so not directly kind of what you shared, but it's kind of leading to that part of you have that another come to Jesus moment with Jesus himself about, where you at, where you want to go, and also how you're going to get there. And in the midst of that emotional dishonesty is going to have to be addressed about, if you're not okay, you're not okay. And definitely being mindful of not wanting to declare over yourself that you're not fine. Because we don't want, you gotta watch out what you say out your mouth, because you'll, manifest those things to yourself or call to yourself. At the same time, when it comes to God, if we believe that he sees all anyway, it's like, okay, God, I am up to the set about this. And it's truly activating, Psalms 55 and 22. That goes into, I think it's also 1 Peter 1, 6 and 7. Basically, casting all your cares unto the Lord because he loves you, and also cast them onto him because he will sustain us. And so in doing so, there is a moment of honesty that we have to have with God and also have with ourselves. So I'm not okay with this, whether it's something that is generated from the world or even something that's generated from God, and be like, I'm not okay with this current state. Because then there is a freedom of that honesty of this is what it is, and then allowing God to do that questioning with us of, well, why are you not okay with this? Why are you not okay with that? And allow for him to do that work for us to potentially pinpoint the reason we're not okay with it, because it gives us a flashback of something that went the wrong way, and it's beyond like just saying like I'm uncomfortable. Well, why is this? Why is that uncomfortable there? Why is that portion there for us? And it's really having that conversation. And like you said, Katrina, that work isn't just a real quick 5-minute conversation with God. Sometimes it is literally, weeks of him peeling back that onion or identifying the true source of whatever the situation may be, because he doesn't want to do a partial healing. God wants us to be fully made whole, and so God is going to walk with us through the entire healing process to be made whole. But he can't, we're not going to allow God to address something, and we're not going to admit that it's there for us. And it's there, it was done, because, our soul is programmed to be dishonest of what's going on inside. And so like we kind of mentioned earlier, I think you said earlier, Katrina, it's that reprogramming that God is trying to do within our soul, trying to not have us be led like the image that Apostle Key shared on Sunday with the training for those who've been through the Divine Plumb Line, noticing that with the emotion being the train, how it was going off the rail, but allowing for Holy Spirit and God's will to direct. And like I mentioned earlier, it's amazing how even when you change who's leading, the emotion wasn't dropped off like getting the word. It wasn't just dropped off. It was still linked to the train. So still having those emotions, but being honest that our emotion is leading right now. And going through the steps to not allow for it to continue to lead in our life, because if no other reason, kind of going back to, when I shared the story about my family, which I totally forgot about, so I got right back to remembrance. I'm like, oh, share this one. is when we went, I mentioned the whole family, which means my little cousin saw it. And so to them, it programs, like you said, Ms. Felder, this is how we roll. And there are good, it's like, and I'm not saying you ain't supposed to ride for your family and group up. I am totally there. Don't get it twisted. But the way you do it and how you show that is that reprogram that has to happen. Like you said, Ms. Felder, if you've been doing that for 30, 35, 40 years, 50 years, as you mentioned that number, you know, it's programmed. That's what you do. And so now, how do we pass on the essence of, you know, we're a family, we're together, we're gonna be bonded, but the way we do that, we need to shift it. You know, that's that retraining for us and that initial training for our children. And even if we catch it later and we've already started programming one way, it's a lot easier to address it now when they're younger than it is if they become full grown. You know, now I know for some, you know, you have grown kids, so you're in kind of a different situation. And I think Ms. Velda did sharing from her experience of how can you still do reprogramming, but you've got to do a lot more experiential part and standing the ground that God's giving you. But for even the grandbabies, or for us who have little children, it's like a lot easier to adjust and address some things and to really give more explanation as to why we do things. Still keeping them in a child's place, not making them adults too soon, but giving them more understanding of what it is, you know. So, you know, I think that's really something to keep in mind as we go along. And so it's also keeping in mind that, and thinking about the question that if we are to be helpers one to another, how do we reveal what offense has broken? You know, because when we talk about this emotional dishonesty, sometimes what will come up is that we recognize that the situation or what caused this dishonesty wasn't a thing, but it was people. But we're called to be fisher of men, we're called to disciples others. So it's like, well, how do we address people, especially, and build up people, walk with them, disciple them as God calls us, when in our soul there's this program of this trust that's there, and so to kind of wrap up, I want to kind of get to that point of how do we do this work that internally will happen, as we said, it takes time. In the midst of it, don't pause when we have those divine appointments, divine encounters, or just people who just latch on to us because they won't let go. Whether, it's at work, whether it's at the grocery store, or whether it's because you cooked for them one time and they ain't gonna leave your house now. Yeah, I'm looking at you, the Shar, yeah, I'm looking at both of y'all. How do we begin to rebuild, when there's offense that maybe the offense caused a broken or what have you?
I think for me, when there have been offenses that have been shown, or like Trina was saying, someone pointed out to you, hey, I thought you were a woman of God. I point out to them, I am a woman of God, but I'm also human and I will make mistakes. However, the difference between you and I is God will send a spirit of conviction upon me. The Holy Spirit will convict me and let me know that what I did wasn't right. So I am woman enough and have enough God in me to come to you and say that I made this error and to please forgive me. Now, what he won't do is give me an excuse to continuously do that. And when you show them that, hey, I am human just like you are, this is how I'm getting closer to God, they tend to respect you more, and they don't put you on this high pedestal that sometimes I believe people put Christians on. And then when we fall, it's like, see, you wasn't no different than the world. They don't always do that to the world, but they definitely will do that to Christians. But I think in showing them that I put on my pants just like you do, I put on my dress just like you do, the only difference is I have a relationship with somebody that you don't. And this is how I got that relationship.
And Mrs. Velda, to piggyback off of that, that was really good, because we didn't talk for a few months. And then when we did talk again, I'm like, let me just start this off by apologizing, you know, and they were shocked. Like, wait, what? They're like, you ain't got to apologize. This is just what we do. I said, but it's not. That's toxic. Like, we can no longer just have these big blow ups and I say whatever I want to say. It's something I've been holding for who knows, probably years, and make you feel like you're less than. And no, this is not normal. This is not okay. So, you know, and they were very shocked. And I think that, you know, after that, they did respect me differently. And they would call me all the time, like, hey, so-and-so said this, so-and-so said that. Can you help me? I'm like, does he think I'm the Bible? So, but I would, you know, it would make me study more because I'm like, and anytime this phone could ring, this person's going to ask me to help them with a situation and, you know, that involved God. So I don't know, but yeah, you're right. So it did.
Right, because you plucked up those old seeds and you planted new seeds, and now they know and they're watching for your growth to see, is this really what she says it's about? And then when they see it, they're like, okay, so I can go back to you. Can you plant some more seeds? Because I don't know what to do in this situation. What does your God tell you you should do? And you're discipling, and you don't even realize that that's what you're doing until you take a look back and take inventory. But I mean, I think that showing our vulnerability sometimes is the best thing that you can do for the world, and show them, look, I'm human. Because again, I run into so many people like, y'all some fake Christians, y'all don't this, y'all don't that. Well, what makes me fake? What makes you so real? What's the difference between us? And I make them point that out to me so that we can have this conversation. We can have this dialect that, listen, I have a different relationship than you do, but there's not a whole lot of difference between us other than that. And it makes them understand the relationship a little bit better. I know that over the last summer, not this current summer, but I had a lot of conversations with young people, and they voiced so many different things to me. And they're like, well, how come you don't tell us that we're wrong? What good is me telling you that you're wrong when you already know you're wrong? You know you are. I'm going to show you the love of God, and then maybe that'll plant something different in you. That's just my 2 cents.
Mhm. And I think those are definitely quality strategies, and definitely approaches that can be duplicated and, you know, and used to apply those elements. Because when you're, what that speaks to me, or what I pick up from it, is a point in which I don't have to directly fight this particular way. I can attack and fight in a more productive way, a way in which, you know, a way in which I'm not telling you, you discover for yourself. And as we know, if you discover something on your own or with some help and you get the realization, there's a higher chance for you to be able to retain it and then apply it, instead of someone just spitting hot fire facts at you and you like, yeah. You know, we see that even just for us as a church. Like, we can sit here and do the, you know, we there's moments when you do the lectural based Bible study, but we got to get the information out. But there's always a Bible study like tonight where it's like, okay, we've talked about this for so long, but how do we convert that knowledge into the application that can actually be done action step wise, so that fruit can come out of all the work that we've done. I don't know about you, but I don't plant seeds to not get a harvest. Like, if I'm gonna put the time into the plant, if I'm gonna take the time to, you know, cook something, I'm looking for a harvest at the end of the day. And so with all those items, to me, you know, we always want to make sure we have that action that's there. But kind of taking a step back is when we think about like the part of the soul needing to be reprogrammed to be able to have that level of conversation with those around us. You know, it does require that point of having a renewed intimacy with God and that honesty with God, and being able to go through some of those scar tissues, you know, because it's there, and with scar tissue, it can be restrictive of where we're trying to go. I'm not gonna blame my wife, but we watch a lot of Olympics right now, and we hear the stories of, you know, medical side of people having to go through recovery and what have you. And they mention different stages that are harder than others. But one of the biggest one is when they try to go back into their full range of motion and they feel like something tore again, when really it was the scar tissue no longer need to be there to, and also tear because it started to restrict their motion that they have to do, whether it's hurdle, it's one of running that we've heard more of it. And so for us, it's that internal work of, we'll be the only one that will feel that scar tissue tear. Because, you know, our muscles or our joints are not strong enough to handle the range of motion that we're going to do to reach the goal that we need to reach. And so to be able to go through that, reprogram the soul, especially when the soul was led through our emotions or the honesty occurred through human interaction, it's being willing to hit those things, you know, fully. So there's no residue left over from whatever the source material is or was or exists to be. Because as we kind of mentioned, we kind of go full circle here, more than likely the people that we're going to minister to are people who walk some type of parallel life that we've gone to. Because it's not just seeing the end result of where they're at, it's also understanding the story behind it. And so with that being said, is ensuring that if we're going to bear each other's burden and support each other, it's ensuring that we're strong enough to handle it. You know, one of the things that Dr. Paula Price mentioned in the teaching is, you know, you've begun to have that healthy soul when you, paraphrase it because I received it, you no longer tell your testimony through victimhood glasses. You know, you're able to tell your testimony in your story. And it's completed, number one, so you can go through the whole cycle, unless God wants you to share part of it for whatever his purpose is. But you've gotten to the end. And so you're able to speak about it in concert and to amplify God through the midst of it. And so with that part being there, that's why I mentioned the scar tissue, because the scar tissue is gone, or the crutch is gone, or the cast is gone. So you're able to then have that healthy dialogue conversation. And so that when we get back into those arenas with people, because if we're about God, we're about people, his people, that those things, those pressures won't activate our emotions to go first. Will be activated is the God in us first, in the midst of it, as we kind of share different examples of that happening. And so in the midst of it, I'm gonna go ahead and start wrapping this up. In the midst of it, you gotta remember to not try to overplease God. You know, we have to really ensure that we're not trying to overplease God. It's interesting, one of the realizations that I've had through different occupations and different roles is to just play your part. You know, do the part you are called to do so that God can get the increase at the end of the day. We're not trying to build our own kingdom, we're trying to build God's kingdom. And, you know, not trying to have people feed our ego or our emotions, but to allow people to see the God in us to amplify him. And so I want to leave with this statement here, and then we're going to go ahead and pray out for tonight. But here's the statement. Your heart conceives, your soul receives, your mind commands. I'll say it again in case you're writing it down or you just want to hear it once again. Your heart conceives, your soul receives, your mind commands.